All right, everybody, welcome to Advanced RMS Training today. I'm Dallas Carlisle with RMS PMO. I'm just going to cut straight to the chase so that way we can get as much training as we can. I'm pass it over to the contractor. Please note that we'll have different sections for questions, and also, of course, we have the YouTube training videos and channel that you can get more additional information as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over. Thank you for attending.
All right, thank you, Dallas. My name is Jennifer. I'm going to be your trainer today. We're going to go over quite a bit of information. Today's training should last somewhere between 2 to 3 hours, give or take. We are going to break this up into sections. At the end of each section, we'll open it up for questions. However, while I'm giving the training, you have the option to post questions into the Q&A section or the chat section in the WebEx, and we will reply as soon as we can. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for today's training, we are going to talk about how RMS actually functions. We are not going to include guidance on business practices, policies, and regulations that govern the contract. These are going to be the basic topics that we're going to go over today while we do all of these different sections. To start off with, we're going to start with the menu items. So basically, when you first log into the district, all the way across the top, you have a bunch of tabs. That's what we're going to talk about. So as you can see on this screen right here, let me get my little pointer out. Pointer, here we go. These guys are right across the top. This is at the top of your district view. So as soon as you log into your district, you will see these lovely little tabs up here. That's what we're going to go about. The first one that you come to is the office, the local office tab. So this is where all of the offices are going to reside and information that goes with all of the offices. In the first little section, you'll see the office tree itself, and these lovely little arrows right here will allow you to expand it. It will tell you if there's something underneath, so if there's a sub office, those will show up under these little tabs right here. Now, when you select any one of these offices, you have the option of opening up these modules that are down here at the bottom in order to view more information about that office. But you need to make sure you select the correct office. If you don't select an office and you go to the office description, it's going to default to your district. So it's going to be all the way up at the top, and it's going to give you the district information. Now, do note that if you want to look at the local office information, you do have to have district or office admin privileges in order to come in here, whether that's full or partial. Just depends on how your user settings are. So if you click in the local office and you don't see anything because it tells you you don't have permissions, you will need to contact the district admin and ask them if you can get those permissions. And if you can, they'll give them to you. If not, then you will just have to take our word for it. This is what it looks like. All right. So you can also have these expand and collapse buttons that are over here on the top right. This will, if you click on the expand, this will expand everything out so you can see all of the offices and sub offices in the order that they are. And if you hit collapse, it'll collapse it all the way down so that all you see is the district office itself. In the office description, this is about what you will see once you've selected your office and you click on the office description button. You can see if you can select the parent office if the office that it's currently set to is not correct by clicking on this lovely little button right here. You can set the information for the office symbol, the office name, manager, phone number, that kind of stuff. It's highly recommended that you set this information for other users to make it easier so that way they know who to contact when they have questions about certain different things. It also helps us at the RMS Support Center because we frequently get users saying, hey, I don't know how to do this, and it has to do with an office policy. We don't have that answer, so if we can come in here and see who the office manager is, we can direct them to the right person so that way they can get the answer to the questions that they're looking for. So keeping this information up to date is probably a best practice and a very good idea to do. Then in the office policies, so we allow you to set the office policies. You have 3 options for setting the office policies, and it has to do with the QA daily reports, whether or not you allow all of them to be edited after completion, only some of them within a certain period of time, or if you're not allowed to edit any of them. So these are the 3 options that can be set. Now, these usually are set at the very beginning, and you don't usually want to change them after they've been set. But if you want to know what your district is set to or your office is set to, you can come into the office policy after selecting your office and find out what it sent you. Office documents. These are documents that are going to be used in your office, can be used in your office, may or may not be used in your office, but they're going to be listed here. So that way you can have an option for all of the offices. If you want to know what all the documents are that can be found in some of the document packages, you can come in here and you can see, oh, well, that's that one, that one, that one. Okay, cool. So you know what they are. This is just a list for your reference. You can add new ones, you can edit old ones, or you can delete them if you have the correct permissions to do so. Next is the mod routing slips. So to complete a modification faster, sometimes if you know that the mod routing is going to be the same all the time, you can come in here and add that information into this section right here for your particular office. That way, whoever's going into the contract and doing the modification, it will save them a little bit of time because it will pre-fill out this information for them. Or you'll be able to really quickly come in here and take a look at it if you need to know that for your reference. The interface schedules. This is just so that way you know when your office is scheduled to have a certain process done. So for this particular office, it tells you that there's a CEFMS import time of 7 a.m. UTC, and then it will also show you what the local time is based off of your district. So keep in mind when you're looking at these times, it's either going to be UTC or it's going to be local time based off of your district. Now, all districts will have an import from CEFMS on a nightly basis, usually when it's off time for your district. So it's not really going to happen when you're working on your district. We also show when the projects are imported from P2, because these two things are not done on demand. However, CEFMS, you can do that on demand inside of contract finances. We'll talk about that in a bit. But for P2 projects, those are not on demand. They get imported on a nightly basis. If you're having any issues with something importing into P2, there's a couple of things that you can look at, and I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later. However, if you can't get something you think it should be showing, you can always contact us at the help desk and we can always help you with that. Remember, if you want to know how to contact the help desk, our phone number is listed at the first slide that was on this particular presentation. This slide is going to be, the slide deck is going to be available on our website, so that way you can download it at your leisure and go ahead and review this when you have time. For the office user entries, so if you're going to be using Word templates and you have certain features that are going to show up only for the office, those features will show up here, and then you can fill in the information so that way when a user goes through and uses one of the Word templates that you set up in the district, I believe it's the district library district office, we'll talk about in a minute, you can have that stuff pre-filled out, and if they need to, they can change it, but otherwise it'll show up with this information here. Then you have the local office milestones. So RMS has 3 different types of milestones, which we'll kind of talk about later. But if you want to set some office milestones that are going to be the same for all of the contracts in your office, this is where you would go about doing that. And this will show you a list of both the system milestones as well as the local milestones. Your local office contract archive. So at one point, someone wanted to be able to archive, and they wanted to allow office admins to archive contracts in their office and only in their office. So what we have done is we have opened this up. So there's 2 archive sections. There's the district and then there's a local office. The local office will allow you to only archive the contracts that are in that office. It's a safety feature. This way, someone doesn't accidentally go in and archive all the contracts in the district, because we wouldn't want that to happen. But this just allows local admins to go in and archive stuff in their office if they have the correct permissions to do so. The P2 projects, this is under construction. This in RMS 2.38, we used to allow where you had to go in and you had to manually import projects from P2. That's no longer required because RMS 3 does all of that for you in the background. So there's not a whole lot going on with that one there. All right, the next tab inside of your district is the district office, and these are the modules that you will be able to take a look at. Now, again, in order to get into the district office, you must have district admin rights of some kind in order to see some of this stuff. All right, so inside the district office, this is the information that you will see, and like the local office, this top part information, we highly recommend that you go ahead and fill this out so that way other people can actually know who to contact, who's the office manager to contact about the particular district office if they have questions regarding district policies. So that way they'll know who to talk to in that case. The next module in here is the position titles. This is a list of all of the position titles that have been added to your district. You can add new ones by using this add one up here. You can choose the edit one. It's just going to tell you what the name is. You can edit the name if you would like to, and you can also delete them as need be. Now, anytime you are in a contract and it goes through and it's asking you for position titles and it brings a lookup field, this is where it's pulling that information from. So if something's not in that lookup field that you're expecting, you'll need to contact a district admin if you don't have district admin privileges and have them add that position title to this module here. Now, as you can see, the next one is contract user roles. We now have two tabs up at the top of the contract user roles showing the actual user roles and staff that are linked to that particular user role. So on the user roles tab, if you go over to whatever user role you're looking for and you want to know who's linked to that user role, you single click on the user role and then you come over to this link staff tab and it will show you all of the staff that is linked to this particular user role when you're going through and doing that. Now, you can also add new user roles, delete old user roles, or edit user roles by using these buttons that are up here up at the top. Now, you can use the edit button. I don't usually use that, because you can just come down here and double click on it and it will open up the edit view automatically instead of having to single click and then move your mouse over here and click on the edit. But it does the same thing. So in here, this is where you go through and you add all of the permissions. You have three options for permissions. It is no access, read only, or read and write. And you'll be able to see by the checkboxes over here really fast what kind of permissions they have. A red X is no access. A yellow check is read only. A green check is read and write. And you can set the permissions as you need them to be. And you can find ones that you want for that direction. All right, office policy. So this is usually set at the very beginning when the district is open. So most of these are already set and you don't really need to know or set or change any of this stuff, because making any changes in this module right here will impact all of the contracts that are in RMS in your district at the time that you make these changes. And these changes could have significant impacts to those contracts that you may or may not want to have done. So we wouldn't recommend that you make any changes into this section right here. However, if you do have questions about what each of these do, you can always contact the help desk support and we'll be more than happy to provide that information for you. The second tab on the district policy section is the mod policy. Same thing, but this is going to show you what the policies were set as for your district for modifications. And then we have the submittal policy. Now, this stuff can be set by a contract basis. So when you go into a contract and you go to contract setup, you will see this information under the Submittals tab. And you can update this for your contract if you need to, if this information is not the same kind of information that you actually want for your contract. But by default, this is where the default information comes from. All right, next we have prime contractors. Okay. This is going to be a list of all of the prime contractors that have been added to your district. Now, it's important if you want a contractor to be able to see a contract, they have to have a prime contractor added to your district. If it's added to a different district, it's not going to do you any good in your district to be able to have them in that district because you don't have access to that district. So you'll want to make sure that you add them into your district under the prime contractors by using the add button over here. Now, if it's a contractor that you know for a fact is never going to be in here anymore and they've been, for whatever reason, they've been dissolved or something, you can go ahead and delete them at that point. One thing to note, if you want to edit the information, you can just double click on the prime contractor that you wish to edit information for. And when you double click on that, it's going to bring up the prime contractor edit view. And at the bottom of that screen, it's going to give you two tabs. The first tab is going to be the contractor staff that is listed for that prime contractor and their basic permissions, whether they have admin permissions or no admin permissions. whether or not they've been linked to the account or not. You also have the ability to add those users back in this section, or you can go into the Contract Administration tab, Prime Contractor module, and add them there. You can add them in both places. Now, the other tab that's down at the bottom of that edit view is the contracts, the linked contracts. So it will give you a list of all of the contracts that are linked to that particular prime contractor under that tab, so that way you can have a quick view to see what's there. Now, one change that we have made here recently is we now have a column here for UEI number. There were some changes that were recently made where it changed the number that's tracking for the users, changed from DUNS to UEI. That information does need to be inputted into RMS in the prime contractors module here at the district. So that way, when it's linked to the contract itself, or when it is in the contract itself, that stuff can be pulled up and properly tracking that contractor information. So we do have a training tutorial video on exactly how to do all of that information on our YouTube channel. And a little bit later, I will try to show you where that is. So that way, if you want to go through and view that, you are more than welcome to do so. All right, FY baseline placements. So if you want to be able to look at your fiscal year baseline placement ideas for different years, that can be done in here. So when you come in here, you'll see all the different years that your district has set up for fiscal year placement baseline information. And you can go and either add that information, delete it, or edit it based off of these items up here. Now, what you'll see in the status over here is it tells you if that baseline is open, meaning you can still make changes to it, or if it's been closed. You'll see a message here that says closed and whatever. And this one for FY 2010, this is our test district, so of course they're all open. It says it was due back on August 4th of 2021. Again, this is our test district, so this isn't necessarily going to be exactly what your district has looked like. Your district is probably going to be closed for 2010. For anything before 2020 probably, or 2021 even, it'll be closed because those years have already been passed. But because this is a test contract, we just left it open. We haven't gone in there and changed that yet. All right, next we have dredging names. So in the past, the dredging names were required if you were going to use dredging on some of the reports inside of RMS. However, we've opened that up to make this optional. So if you want to put the information in here, check with your district's policy to see if this information has to be in here. Now, this is for dredge stuff that is government owned. So the names that go in here are going to be for government owned dredging. So just keep that in mind. And again, check with your district's policy to see if you need to add that information into your district or not. And again, you have your add, edit, and delete field up here. All right, archive contracts at the district office level. Again, same thing as the last one. Now, one thing to note about this one, and the other one as well, is if a contract has been archived and later down the road, you need access to the documents that were in that contract, you will see that on both the office and the district level, you have these export contract file buttons that are showing up here at the top. Now, what this is going to allow you to do is get all of the documents that were in the contract file module before the contract was archived. So that way you will have a list of all of those documents. Now, there's the caveat with that. If your contract, or if that contract was gigabytes and terabytes large and you choose this export option, keep in mind that's going to take a really long time for that to complete the process. So RMS doesn't give you that little I'm thinking. It just, when you go to the file where you tell it to download, you'll see that there's a document there. There's another document there. There's another document there. So you're going to want to keep an eye on those two things and leave your RMS on and connected to the network until all of the files are done and RMS sends you a message, I'm done. And then you can go ahead and do that. Now, another thing to note about this, if you're going to export the contract files and your network is not exactly slow, I would advise, or not exactly fast, it's a little slower than what you want it to be, then I would advise you to disconnect from the VPN, because RMS government mode does not require the government VPN in order to connect to the internet. However, if you've already started the process of exporting the contract files on the VPN and it has not errored out, don't change your VPN settings, because if you do, it's going to error out and you're going to have to start all over again. We don't want you to do that one. So you'll also see that you've got the Archive a Contract button up here and the Unarchive Contract. When you click on either one of these, this archive contract is going to show you a list of all of the contracts that you can choose to archive. And to choose multiple contracts to archive, there are these lovely little checkboxes that run on the left-hand side. Make sure that when you choose more than one, you only click on these checkboxes. Because if you click anywhere other than those checkboxes, say you click this one and then you come over here and you're like, oh, I want to add this one, and you click here, well, that one's going to disappear. So make sure you only do the checkboxes that are on the left-hand side. Now, do not use this unless you really, really, really want to. And that's this button right here. This is a select all. So my advice to you, don't use it. Pretend like it doesn't exist. And if you check it, make sure you uncheck it immediately. Because you're not going to want to archive all of the contracts in your district. I can't see that ever happening. So, all right. The next tab in your district, the system library. Now, something to note about the system library. Pretty much everything, all of the modules that are in the system library are more for your reference than for anything else. It's just so that you can see that. Now, there are some exceptions, and I will talk about those in the modules as we go through and look at them. The first one is the RMS Asset Store. Now, this is one of the exceptions. Now, say you've got a custom report or a Word document template that you are using that you know District XYZ could benefit from. Now, we've added this little section here where you can take those reports and take those templates and add them here to allow it to be accessible to all the districts within RMS. So if you know something is going to be useful to all other districts and you want to provide that for the other districts, or say you have more than one district and you're using it in District A and you want to use it in District B, but you don't want to recreate it, you can come in here and choose the add option, add that information here. And then when you get into the district, you can copy it from in here by double clicking on whatever it is. And then there's a button inside that says copy asset to the district. Excuse me. And it will tell you who the author is, when it was updated last, which district it came from, the title, as well as what kind of asset it happens to be. The next one is the fund types. Now, this is only partially editable. As you can see, the fund type number as well as the description and the program are not editable, but you can choose which of these fund types are going to show up in the contracts. So this information, these fund types are available for all contracts and all possibilities. But the thing is not all districts are going to use all of these fund types. So we've allowed you the option to go in and check or uncheck the fund types over here based off of whether or not your district is going to need them. Now, again, you have to have the correct permissions inside of System Library to make any of these edits. It's probably at least partial district admin rights. I don't think you can get it with office admin rights, but it might be. I'd have to look at that one. But you do need some admin rights in order to get in here and make these changes. So if you're in a contract and you're trying to add a fund type and you don't see the one you think you should be seeing and you don't have admin rights at the district or office level, contact your district or office admin and ask them to check the box for that particular fund type so you can get that in your lookups. Here's another partial exception, and that is the program types, where you cannot update the program type itself or the description, but you can choose whether or not they are included in the lookup fields by these little checkbox here. And again, permissions, you have to have partial or full admin permissions in order to do this one, either district or office. All right, next we have the contract status codes. This is read only. This is for your information. If you want to know what the contract status codes, what all of them happen to be, then you can come in here and take a look. So if you're in the contract and you go to a lookup field that's talking about contract status codes, this is where it's pulling this information. Now, this information is only editable by the RMS Support Center. So If something needs to be changed, that change has to come from the PMO direction. So if you think something is missing from here, you will need to contact the RMS PMO and say, hey, this is missing because of XYZ, and provide the documentation, and then they'll let us know, hey, we need to add this into this particular section. Now that also goes for the delay codes. Delay codes, we want to know what delay codes are available in RMS. They will show up in this module right here. This is the primary delay codes module. And again, any changes from this must be directed from the PMO, and RMS Support Center will update as required. The mod reason codes are the same. I do apologize, the screen doesn't show, but basically the mod reason codes, all of those will list on the same thing in the module. It's the same concept. You cannot edit these. This is just for your view only. And if you need to make changes, the RMS PMO must dictate that information to us. Here's the mod reason codes. Okay, so showing up right here. Next, we have the FAR references screenshot showing up here. And this is, again, just for your reference. And these are all of the paragraph numbers and the type of FAR that it happens to be, as well as the clause date and the title of those. If you want to know what they are, you can come in here and take a look and see what is available and when it was available. And then we have your agency codes, same thing, only editable by the RMS Support Center. You can't make these changes. This is based off of USACE headquarters provided information. And the specification sections. So there are three main master formats for the specification sections. That is 1995, 2004, and 2014. And if you click on each of these tabs, you will see the there's different section types that will show up in there, as well as the information for those ones. Now, with these ones, you can't edit them here. However, if in the contract you find that your specification needs to be slightly different, you can make those changes inside of the contract itself and add them using either a SpecsIntact import, a submittal registry import, or just manually entering that information into RMS. Here we have the PD squared CLIN units. So a list of all of the PD squared CLIN units will show up in this particular module. So that way you can take a look and see all in one place without having to go into a contract and find it inside some module buried in the contract. And then we have the category codes and units of measurement. So up at the top, you've got the different category codes. You've got the Army, the Navy, and the United States Air Force category codes. And then all of the units of measurement that are listed with, that can be added for different types of CLINs. RMS reports. So these are the reports that the RMS Center actually creates. Sorry about that. Need to have some water. So the RMS reports, this is a list of all of the reports that the RMS Support Center has generated and provided for you in order to see all of them really quickly, see what the report type is, whether it's a district report or a contract report, and where it falls in the menu, if it's a scheduled type report under the finances, under the admin tab, that kind of information. And here is the CEFMS batch download times. This will show you all of the CEFMS, when CEFMS actually imports for all of the districts. You just need to know what the EROC code is for the district that you're looking for, and then using the search box right here, type in whatever that EROC code happens to be. Now, if you want to know what your EROC code is for your district, there's two ways to do that. Log in, go back to the main screen of the district and look down at the bottom and look at the contract ID. Make sure it's the contract ID, not the number. The first two characters of the contract ID are your EROC code for your district. Also, you can do it at the map. If you go to the map and you hover over a district, underneath it, it will say EROC code, and then it'll show you the two numbers that'll show up there. So those are the two ways that you can find your EROC code if you want to know what that is. Now, 9 times out of 10, if you require assistance with something in your contract, we're going to ask you for your contract ID, because that will tell us what district you're in as well as which contract it's with. And it's easier than sometimes finding your contract number, which isn't always Can't always put it in the right district, unfortunately. All right, next we have the summary reports. So for the summary reports, there's a lot of things that will show up in the summary reports. This is so that way you can track reporting for the whole district, or if you have custom reports that you want to see that are for the whole district or for a whole office, all of that stuff will show up here in the summary report. Now, you do have to have at least read permissions for the summary reports in order to be able to come in here and take a look at what's going on in here. Now, if you want to add summary reports or edit or archive them, you, of course, will need read-write permissions inside of the summary reports in order to be able to do that. So if you need those permissions, you will need to contact your district admin and ask them for those permissions. They'll probably ask you for, well, why do you need those permissions? And then you'll have to provide that stuff. But you will need to get those permissions if you are going to be able to do that. All right. RMS GIS. So GIS stands for Geographic Information System. So this area is still under construction because there's various different reasons why. But under each of these sections, you will see that there is a list of the contracts that fall under these statuses. So for this one right here, archive contracts, if you click on this module, it's going to show you a list of the locations for all of the contracts that are active contracts. This one's going to be for future, for this year, future, for next year, etc. It's all going to be about the same. But progress in this is still going to be updated. So keep in mind that when you go in here, if it's not showing what you think it's supposed to be showing, it's probably because it's still under construction. So just keep that part in mind. User settings. All right, so this is going to be for your local cache settings and preferences on your local computer. Not to do with RMS, well, kind of to do with RMS, but it's not to do with anything on the network. It's on your actual computer. So when you open up the user settings, this is what you're going to see. The default is to have an unlimited cache. Now, most computers are good enough and most networks are good enough that you can go ahead and sit with this unlimited cache. However, if you have an older, slower computer, you might want to change this. But again, that's only going to be for older, slower computers. And I do mean older. But if you don't want unlimited, you want to set that you only can have a cache of a certain amount, then you can uncheck this box and set this setting right here. Now, note that this information is only going to be for your computer. It's not going to affect anybody else in the district. It's just yours. Now, you can also set some user preferences for your computer as well. So the first two will allow you to view something in a contract based off of what you did the last time. Now, the top one is for when you open up any contract, you're going to go to the last section. This second one is going to be where if you close, so this is the same session. This is a different session, but they do the same thing. So if the last thing that you did in RMS was the Finances tab pay activities, and you have this checkbox checked, and you don't close RMS, but you go to another contract, it's going to take you to the exact same location for that contract. For this checkbox, if it's the pay activities and you close RMS and then open up a new section of RMS, it's still going to go to the pay activities because that's what you told it to do. You said automatically go where I was last time. This one is automatically go where I was in the last contract if it's the same section. You can use these ones together or separately or not at all. It's up to you. And of course, if you want to subscribe to our email updates, just check this box right here. And then, of course, you have these options down here for how you want this to work on your computer. All right, RMS Mobile. So the thing about RMS Mobile, it has been decommissioned and is no longer available to be used for new users. However, the information that was loaded into RMS from users that had this in their system prior to it being decommissioned are still available for you to take a look at and use if you need to. Next, we have the RMS Staff tab. Now, we didn't show you that above this part, above the add, edit, and delete, there are a couple of sort tiles. Now, those sort tiles are quite useful if you want to go in and see various different things. You have a sort tile to view all of the users. You have a sort tile to view active or inactive users. You can sort by admin types, either partial or full by each office, or for district admin types, you can search for partial or full admins. You can also search to see if someone has district-wide read-only access. And what you will note is that this section right here, when you click on those sort files, this section is going to change, letting you know what it is that you're seeing. Now, the first thing that you will see is you'll see the name of the user that happens to be their RMS ID, which is usually the same thing as their UPass, because if they're going to have access or need to send things to CEFMS within RMS, their RMS ID must match their CEFMS login, which is their UPass. So make sure that if your user is going to need access to CEFMS to send payments to CEFMS, that the RMS ID matches whatever it is that they're logging into CEFMS with. And then, of course, whatever office they happen to be associated with. Whether or not they are active users or inactive users, last time that they logged in, and if they have been deleted. All right, so this ends the first part of these sections. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. And if I don't hear anything in a couple of seconds, I'm going to go ahead and move on. All right, no questions. Okay. Let's continue on to the next section. I will give us a 5-minute break at the next section that we've done. So if you need to go take care of some business really fast, we'll go ahead and give you a 5-minute break so that you can do that. All right, finances, everybody's favorite. Finances are a complicated beast. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about some of this stuff now. In this section, I am going to talk about some of the common issues that you will have with various different things. So that way you're very much aware of them. And if you have other questions, of course, you can always submit a support ticket to the RMS Support Center at any point in time. All right, the finances module. Here's some information for you to review at your leisure. This is just some more in-depth information talking about various different things that could be related to the finances. All right. When you log into a contract, you can go over to the Finances tab, which is showing right here. It usually is somewhere in the middle, sometimes at the bottom, depending on what you have your screen settings set to. And then here are the modules that we are going to be discussing. And the list again of all of the modules that we're going to be discussing. Now, something to note about this section or any section, anytime you're in RMS, if you're using a laptop that has a small screen, and you only see like the first part, you don't see anything at the bottom. You think there's supposed to be an OK button or a next button, and you don't see that. It's probably got something to do with your Windows display settings. It's something to do with your Zoom. It's a known issue with Windows. It can't do the full display. You will have to change that kind of settings. We do have a YouTube tutorial video talking about how to fix that. That's on our YouTube channel, which I'll try to show you guys later. All right. Contract finances, my favorite. So this is a section where you're going to be able to see all of the information that has to do with CEFMS for your contract. Now, prior to coming into the contract finances, there are a couple of things that you have to do. If this is a brand new contract, the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to update the milestones into the system on this, what was that? Schedule tab, excuse me. Go to the Schedule tab on the previous screen that we were just in, right? It was the previous screen? Yes, this screen. You're going to come over here to the Schedules tab, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Go into the milestones and make sure that the contract award actual date has been set. Because prior to the contract award actual date and the duration being set, when you go to the Finances tab, the only thing that you're going to see in this section right here is going to be a little button that says Future Contracted. Which it could be useful if you're going to be adding information for the future, but if this isn't supposed to be an active contract that you're going to work on, you need to update those schedules in order to get that in. Now, the other thing that you have to do in order to connect to CEFMS with this contract is go to the Administration tab, and then I believe it's over here. It says Contract Setup, and then also Contract Description. First, you're going to go to contract description, and you're going to update the contract number and the delivery order number. What you put in there is going to be exactly what's in CEFMS. So you'll have to go to CEFMS and see exactly how it's put in CEFMS. Dashes, slashes, spaces, everything. Exactly the way it shows in CEFMS, put it in the description. And then you need to go over to contract setup and make sure that the CEFMS checkbox is checked and that you have in the drop down, it is set for your district. Now, by default, it's going to be set for your district. However, there are cases where your district actually isn't the CEFMS district that monetizes this particular contract, in which case you will have to change it from your district to whatever district the CEFMS district that is responsible for money for this contract is in. And then once you've done that, then you can come to this lovely little page right here and click on the CEFMS download button. This will get all of the information to show up into RMS once all of that stuff is set up correctly. Now, when you click on this button, RMS is going to think about it while it says, hello CFMS, do you have new information for me for this? Once it's done, it's going to bring up a little pop-up screen. There are two little bits of information that might show up on that pop-up screen. One is that everything has been downloaded from CFMS, and all you have to do is click OK, you're good to go. The other one is going to be no obligations were found in CFMS. This is where you're going to be like, does my contract number and delivery order number inside of RMS match exactly what's in CFMS? 9 times out of 10, it doesn't, and that's why you get that message. So just keep that in mind when you're doing the CFMS download. If you get an OK box that says no obligations found, check CFMS and then check your contract description, make sure they match exactly, and then try again. Now, the next thing to note about this screen is you've got these lovely little sort tiles over here, which will show you various different bits of information according to whatever it is that you're looking for. And then these expansion buttons, arrows that are showing up on the left-hand side, or you can use the expand and collapse options right here, which will allow you to just fully expand everything that's showing up in here. Now, selecting on anything in this box right here will give you some detailed information for it down here at the bottom, and changing your selection will change the information that shows up down here. All right. The next thing to talk about with this one is CEFMS Cleanup. Now, CEFMS Cleanup is, in the past, was supposedly very, very, very scary. However, that was because that if the contract delivery order number and the contract number did not match what's at CEFMS, you could come in here and you can click on this CEFMS Cleanup button, and all of a sudden, all your finances are gone. It's like, but that's easy to fix. All you have to do is go to CEFMS, find out what the contract number and delivery order number, and make sure RMS matches that information. Once that happens, you can come back and do the CEFMS Cleanup again, and voila, this back, you're good to go. Now, the other thing to note is that because this can have such high impacts on the contract, you get a warning message and you must log your information with RMS, and we record when and who did this particular procedure. So keep that in mind. When using CEFMS Cleanup, 9 times out of 10, you don't really actually need to use CEFMS Cleanup unless you've completely changed everything, the funding accounts and all of that stuff for the actual contract. So just use the CEFMS download. But again, all you have to do is make sure that the contract description and the delivery order number and the CEFMS database in contract setup are set correctly inside of RMS, and anything that magically disappeared will magically reappear once you click on that information, as long as it's set up correctly. Okay, moving to the CEFMS Finances tab with more details. This is how it shows up with it fully expanded. So it starts off with the appropriation number, and then it goes into the funding account, the PRNC, and the obligation line item that is associated with that. And that's the tree that will show up in this particular case. Next is the contract funding tab. This is where all of the funding will show up. Now, if you've already done the CEFMS download and you have a bunch of CEFMS funding accounts, these will show up automatically, and you won't need to use the add button or the delete button or anything else up here. But if you want to double click on them to view more information, you can do so, or you can just single click on it and then come down here to take a look at some of the specifics that are with your with your particular account. And let's see here. The next one is project funding. Now, project funding tab only shows up if your contract setup under the administration tab funding method option is set to track funding at project level. Now, there's 2 track funding at project level. It's either manually or based on available funds. Most contracts don't use track at project funding level. So we're not really going to talk terribly much about this one, but know that if you do have it set up to track at the funding level, this tab will show up in your contract finances. And this is where the information is going to be a little bit different. So the contract funding for regular contracts, you're going to be able to put in the contract amount as well as the obligations for that amount prior to doing the award CLINs. However, if you've got track at project funding, then you'll have the contract amount showing on the contract funding and the obligations showing in the project funding. So they'll be in two separate places. So just keep that in mind. If you're used to setting it up with track pre-planning, then you go into a contract that has been set up to be track at the project level. Just know that that's slightly different. So instead of having the obligations and the amounts in one place, it's in two separate places. So keep that in mind. All right, funding balances. It shows up on all of them. And this is just going to show you all of the funding accounts that are associated with your contract. And again, clicking on them, you're going to have some information that's going to show up down here at the bottom. Now, this screen and this tab are your friends for finding out why something isn't showing up in RMS like you expect it to be. Now, a lot of the times, the information that's entered into CEFMS doesn't always get imported into RMS correctly because something was missing inside of CEFMS. I have no idea what that is because we are not allowed to give support for CEFMS. So if you have found that something is not showing up in here and it says available for request in CEFMS is $0 and you know it's not supposed to be $0, you're going to have to go to CEFMS support to find out which checkbox was missed or which view was not done correctly or what information is missing in order to get this information to show up in RMS. Once you've gotten that figured out in CEFMS, you can come back to RMS, do a CEFMS download, and this information should show up. The other things to look at is the PRNCs for this contract, as well as total available for contract. This information right here will allow you to find out if CEFMS was set up correctly, because sometimes it's not. It happens. There's a lot of screens in CEFMS from what I've heard about, so I get it. Sometimes you just miss something. It happens, especially when you're in a rush. So if you come in here and this information isn't showing what you think it should be showing, go check CEFMS and make sure everything that was supposed to be checked was checked. If you don't have access to CEFMS, you will need to contact the person that does and make sure that gets taken care of. All right. Next, we have the obligation balances. Again, you can also do it with this one just to see how much information is for each of the obligations and click on them here, here, and here. Let's see. I think, oh yeah, we're good. All right, award CLINs. So backing out of the contract finances and going to the right by one module brings you to the award CLINs module. Now, with the award CLIN module, you must first set up the contract finances before you can start setting up the award CLINs, because RMS will get a little upset because the obligations and the amounts aren't set up in the contract finances first. But when you come into the award CLINs, one thing about the award CLINs is you set it once and it's done. You don't change it after you have been set if you've made any progress payments to the contract or any modifications to the contract. So make sure that when you put in the award CLINs that they are correct when you put them in the first time, because if you go through halfway the contract and you realize, oh, well, this award CLIN was set up incorrectly, I've got to delete that. One, if there's a modification that's already been on this particular CLIN that was set in RMS, RMS is not going to let you delete it. Two, if you remove this one, because RMS builds on building blocks, it starts with the bottom and then you have another building block on top of it. And if you take off the bottom, the whole thing is going to fall over. So you don't want to try and get rid of the bottom, because then the rest of it's not going to work. You could potentially make a lot of mistakes in the progress payments if you try and delete any of that kind of information. So the award CLINs is set it and forget it. Done. If anything needs to be fixed because it's not right, it must be done in the contract modifications, contract changes and modifications module. That is the only place that you can make those changes if things have already been changed on a contract. So when you click on the add button on the previous screen, you have the option of doing either a price parent CLIN or a price sub CLIN. Now, the biggest difference you can see that there's some information. It'll tell you what the difference are. But the biggest difference is with the sub-CLIN, you can only link it to one obligation and one obligation only. So if down the line you think that maybe you would have to change the obligation from one to the other, it would be easier if you just set it as a price parent CLIN. However, check with your district's policy to see which one you guys are going to be using, because they are the final say in which one to use. Once you have selected the correct one, you come over here, it's going to be in the bottom right, and click your next button. Now, this is the award CLIN edit view. If you are in the award CLIN list, you double click on it, it's going to show this one, or after you finish adding, speak, it's going to show this edit view as well. Now, things to note about this particular view. You can change the description of the award CLIN at any point in time. I would highly recommend that you use what's in CEFMS to make your life better and easier. Now, one thing to note about award CLINs in RMS versus award CLINs or CLINs period in CEFMS, they are not the same thing. CLINs inside of RMS are not seen in CEFMS. CEFMS doesn't know and doesn't care what is set inside of RMS. So literally, you probably could set whatever you want here in RMS, but to make your lives easier and to make whoever's going to be doing the progress payments easier, it's best to set your CLINs based off of what you have in CEFMS with the same information. So that way, whoever's doing the progress payments or the modifications will know when, where, and how to put money in various different places. So what you can do once you've done that, you can change the unit of measurement. However, once it's set, I would suggest stop changing it, because especially if you're going to go from like a quantity to a amount, that could cause problems. So once you set the unit of measurement, that's done. But you click on this blue box, it's going to bring a lookup field of whatever the unit measurement was. Now, also in the second screen of creating or adding a new CLIN, after you choose priced parent CLIN or sub CLIN, and you click the next button, it's going to ask you to put in the description and to choose the unit of measurement. Once you've done that, it'll open this guy up. But say you just did it and you realize, oh, I accidentally clicked the wrong one. You can click on this blue box. It's going to bring the lookup field for all of the units of measurement that you have to choose from, which, by the way, remember, was in the district office. And then choose the correct one, and then try not to change it after that. Now, the award amount, quantity, and price will show as editable based off of this checkbox right here. If this is not checked, depending on if you are doing a quantity unit of measurement or a amount unit of measurement, it will depend on whether these two are editable or this one is editable. So for a lump sum, the only thing that's going to be editable is this award amount. But if you're going to do like a quantity, say square feet or something to that effect, then it's the top two that will be editable in the CLIN. Then once you click on this CLIN pricing complete ready to fund, all of this stuff becomes ineditable and you can no longer make any changes at that point in time. And the funding button will then become visible, so that way you can set up the funding inside of this particular CLIN. One thing to note, some districts and some contracts will set up $0 amount award CLINs because of options for the contract, and they just want to go ahead and set all that stuff up in the forefront to make sure that stuff is done. When you do that, that's perfectly fine, but make sure you check this box. CLIN pricing ready is complete, ready to fund, in order to be able to make any adjustments to it in the contract changes, contract modifications, when you get to the point where, yep, you got to add money because the option was checked. Like, yes, this option is going to be used, let's give it money. Make sure this button is checked now, so that way you don't have to go back and do that later. One thing to know, if you have track at funding project level, funding at project level option for your contract, there's going to be another button right here that you will have to check in order for this funding button to show up. So you'll have to check the CLIN pricing complete, and then you'll also have to check pre-plan obligations. But for probably about 90% of the contracts, you're not going to be tracking at project level, so you won't have that button. And then when you've got the funding option available, you're going to click on the funding, and then in that view, what it's going to do is it's going to show you the list of all of the funding accounts and their work items, PRNCs, and obligation line items that are associated with that. You just have to choose which one to put it on, and you will see, so basically it will show this information, but it'll show every single funding account, not just the one that's down here right now. And on the obligation amount column, you will need to put the right amounts on the right funding account in order to get this funded correctly. Now, whether or not you're putting it on one funding account or one obligation line item or two obligation line items, that's up to however it was set up in CEFMS. So keep that in mind. And then once you are done, once you put the amount in there, you will have down at the bottom, similar to this one right here, which will talk about what the amount was, which is coming from here, this information. And then the obligations, which will come from the funding tab here, which is what we entered in this obligation column. And then variances. And as long as there's no variance, then you can click the next button, which will show up down here, and then a finish button. And once you click the finish button, it's going to save all that information, bring it back to this screen, and then the funding account or funding account that you listed will show up right here in this lovely little list at this point. All right, here's some more information about the price parent CLINs and the information on the price parent CLINs. You can read this at your leisure. I kind of hit on this sort of, but this is more information, more in depth. Okay, current CLINs is the next module inside of the Finances tab. And this module is just read only for your reference. So that way you can see what your contract is sitting at that time. Now, what you will see is all of the CLINs that are associated with this contract based off of whether or not they were added from awards or modifications. And if you want to know what the history is of each of those CLINs, just single click on it up here at the top and then take a look down here at the bottom. Excuse me. And down here at the bottom, you'll be able to see that, hey, it's only with an award CLIN, or if it wasn't a modification, then you'll see that list showing up down here and how much that modification did, whether it was plus amount, plus some time, minus some time, that kind of stuff. It'll show up down here. And then, of course, all the way down at the bottom, it will tell you what your current contract amount happens to be and what your current CLINs happen to be. Now, if these two numbers don't match, that means something is not quite right, either in the modifications or in the award CLINs, and you'll have to get that variance taken care of before proceeding with doing any progress payments inside of RMS. All right, the next module is the Pay Activities module. Now, this is some information that will be good for you to go ahead and take a look at and read. I'm not going to take time to read that right now because we have a lot of information to go over. However, the Pay Activities module, this is what it will look like when you go into the Pay Activities module. Now, most of the time, the contractor is going to be the one responsible for entering all of the pay activities into RMS, either manually by using this lovely little add button over here, or by importing it from their NAS SDEF file inside of the contract. Now, to save a lot of work in the long run, it's probably best to use an SDEF file. However, you have to check with your district's policy or your office policy, or even the contract itself, to see whether it's going to be manually entered or using an SDEF file. Now, the basics for when you come in here, if you need to manually edit some of these things for whatever reason, I will talk about that a little bit later, but I'm going to give you a basic view of what this is going to help you with. So we've got a couple of tabs that are running across the top, which we'll talk about as well. And off of all of these tabs, you have these sort tiles. Now, these sort tiles are quite convenient because if you have hundreds of pay activities and there's a variance down here showing up either on a specific plan or on the whole contract, and you want to find out, okay, where's the problem lying with that? Then you can come over here and click on this activities with no CLIN or an invalid CLIN sort box. What this will do is it will change the view and reduce it down to only the activities that don't have a CLIN or have an invalid CLIN. And of course, it'll show the count with this number right here. And the same thing, if you want to see all of the activities, you can click back on here to go back to that. If you need to add anything, you click on the add button. If you want to edit it, I would just double click on it down here to take a look at it that way. And then of course you can delete it. We'll talk about the deletion later. You have a a search box. This is your friend. I love the search box. I use it quite frequently, especially with those contracts that have lots and lots of stuff. If I know I'm looking for a specific number or a specific description, I'll start typing that in the search box to reduce what's showing up in here. So that way I don't have to look for a needle in a haystack. So make your life easier. Use a search box. It's your friend. If you want a list of all of the activity IDs that are currently active, you can always use this export function right here. All this export is going to do is show you what's in this table. Now, you can export it as an Excel file, or you can export it as a PDF. That's your choice as to which one you want to do for that one. All right, CLIN tab. This tab is also your friend if you are noticing that the variances with a particular CLIN and you want to take a look and see, okay, which CLINs are not balanced and which CLINs are balanced. So you'll come over to the CLINs tab, and of course you've got your short tabs up at the top, all of the CLINs, balanced CLINs, unbalanced CLINs with the counts of each of those sections. And of course, if something is unbalanced and you're looking at all CLINs, you can come over to the status here and take a look and see what's going on. If it's unbalanced, it's going to show in red. So it'll pop out in front of you like, hello, I need to be fixed. In which case, what you can do is you can double click on any of the CLINs that you want to take a look and see what activities are associated with it. And when you double click on it, it's going to show you all of the activities that are linked to that CLIN. And it'll also show you the total current contract amount for that CLIN, as well as the sum amount of all of the activities that are linked to that CLIN. And then you can find out which one needs to be corrected, at which point your contractor, who is the one responsible for this, should probably be the one doing that. But if they need help because they can't figure it out, you can tell them, hey, have you looked at the CLINs tab and have you looked at the statuses to see which one is non-balanced? That will help them out because, yeah, sometimes if they're new, they won't know how to do that. Next, we have the Contractors tab. So for the Contractors tab, it's going to show you all of the contractors and subcontractors that are associated with this contract. Of course, it's going to have your prime contractor listed in here. And that is going to be your, usually, prim, which will show up in your responsibility code over here. And then you have any other subcontractors that happen to be on there as well. Whether or not your contract is set up for subcontractors is just dependent upon your office district or contract policy. So check with those to see if you're supposed to have that. And if you are, have your contractor correct that. Now, you will see that some of these are red and some of them are not. And that is because the number of activities that are associated with them are 0. So if it doesn't have any activities associated with it, it's going to show up in red. And of course, if you have your activity count, this is how many are associated with that subcontractor or contractor. This is the name of the contractor, the responsibility of the contractor, and then the trade of the contractor. Again, this is a training contract, so we've got some in here that were not properly set. Yours should never show with no full contractor name and should never show with no trade set. So keep that in mind. Subcontracted amount out. This could be $0 or not. It just depends on how your contract is set up. Again, you have your export and your search. They are both your friends. And of course, your sort up here. You can see which contractors are linked to pay activities, that's this one, and which ones are not, that's this one over here. And as you see on this contract, 10 of our subcontractors are not linked to pay activities. Again, testing contract. All right, Features tab. Now, the features of work are not going to show anything in here if they have not first been set up in the QA/QC Features of Work module first. So they have to be set up there first before anything shows up in here. And as you can see, there's a bunch of red stuff in here because we have a bunch of features set up on this particular test contract that were not linked to any activity. And of course, your activity count shows up here. You have your sorts across the top, all features, features linked to pay activities, features not linked to pay activities. These are your friends. They will help you out for a lot of stuff. And of course, you have your feature ID that will show up as well. All right, here's some more information about what we can do when editing a pay activity. And I'll kind of go over this stuff in the next couple of slides. So I'm not going to read this one, but if you want, again, download it from our website and you can read this at your leisure. Okay, so a thing to know. When you are on when you go into the pay activities and you double click on the pay activity from the activity tab, this is the view that will show up. This will also show up after you've added a pay activity manually. Now, this will just give you a basic information on how to go about doing this. Something to note here, all contracts will show this information for the pay activity view. However, if your contract is not, or excuse me, if your contract is set up for dredging, you will have 3 extra tabs that will show up across the top. If you don't have this information showing up across the top, then your contract hasn't been set up for dredging. If it's supposed to be set up for dredging, you'll need to go to the contract setup, go to the dredging tab, and check that lovely little box that says set up for dredging, so that way you can get this information to show up. But if it's not supposed to be set up for dredging, y'all shouldn't see these 3 tabs, so don't worry about that. Now, in these 2 tabs right here, these are the dredging survey information. What the contractor is going to be able to put in here is they're going to be able to put things like when the survey is supposed to be, when the survey is scheduled for being completion, when the survey was completed, any comments that were done, the survey type that they're going to use, the survey type that they actually used, performance information like depth estimates or actuals, and then quantities. And then, of course, you have your comments tab for the contractor, add any comments that the government needs to take a look at and see. So that's where that information will fall up. If it's related to an activity, that's where the contractor puts that information. But if you're not doing dredging on your contract, y'all don't need to worry about that. You won't even see it. All you really need to worry about is this lovely information down here. Now, with the CLIN pricing assignments, all of that stuff is done down here at the bottom. And the contractor or the government, if you guys are doing it for whatever reason, can enter the activity amount totals or change it accordingly. And then once they select the CLIN from this drop-down selection view here, then this information will usually populate automatically. So if it is a quantity amount, you will see these 2 guys right here. If it is a dollar amount, then you will only see the CLIN unit price, and you can't edit that because that was set in the award contract or the contract modification. So that information is going to be showing what's in the current contract module for that CLIN. And then, of course, you can update the quantity, because if it's a quantity CLIN, that is, because some activities might use this amount and some activities might use that amount. But in this particular case, it's a little bit different. And they're setting how much they're actually using from that CLIN here at the activity amount edit thing there. Oh, lovely. Here's the one for a CLIN that has dollar amounts only, and you can't set the lump sum at all. Oh, wait a minute. Let me go back here. You can set the description. They can set the subcontractor. Now, this brings up a lookup field for all of the subcontractors that have been entered into RMS. If no subcontractors have been entered into RMS, clicking on this button is going to show you a list of nothing. So if there's supposed to be subcontractors, you need to go to the admin tab, go to the subcontractors module. Well, the contractor should be the one doing this, and then add the subcontractors there. The feature, this is going to bring a lookup of all of the features that are associated with this particular contract. That, remember, that has to be done in the QA/QC tab under the features of work module, and that has to be set in there, usually done by the contractor. And then the contractor will set the duration, the phase, and the area based off of what was agreed upon by the government. And they can set the work category code by clicking on this lookup field. And if it is dredging, you will also see this dredging water feature. You can click on this. Now, this information is set up in the district. I believe it's the district library. It's either district library or system library. I can never remember which, but it's one of those 2. And that's where that information is going to be set up. This is optional. It doesn't necessarily have to be set up, but it's probably a good idea and a good practice to get all of that stuff set up. But it has to be set up in the district first before it can be used inside of a contract. All right. So that's more information. Oh, whoop, we're moving on to modifications. Okay, so we're going to be talking about balancing for modifications. This is for the pay activities. So if you do a modification and it's going to change the dollar amount of your contract, that means that your pay activities are now going to be unbalanced. So that has to be updated. What happens in a modification is you can actually go into the pay activities tab inside of a modification, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And you can add another one if you need to, or edit or delete one that happens to be in there. However, I highly recommend that the contractor does this, not the government. And the reason being is because if the contractor is using an SDEF file and the government adds an activity ID into the contract to balance out a modification, and the contractor doesn't take that information and put it in their scheduling software, the next time they do an SDEF import, that contract ID, that pay activity is going to be gone. Bye-bye. Which is easy to fix. However, it could create some confusion, and the contractors can be scratching their head the next time they go do a progress payment, because now they've got a negative number on their progress payment. They're like, why do I have a negative number on here? I don't know. I don't get it. That's why I would suggest that if you are doing a modification, once the modification has been added to RMS, send a message to your contractor. Hey, you need to balance your pay activities. Make sure you update your scheduling software and import a new SDEF file. So all of that stuff is now corrected in there, and you can do your next progress payment. Because otherwise, if you don't, like I said, you can get negative numbers in the progress payments, and this will cause some confusion for certain users. So though you can manually do it, again, I would recommend that the contractor do it, not the government. All right, again, manually adding an activity. So in this particular case, this really should be done by the contractor. However, this for your information, so that way you can go through and take a look at it, and you know how the contractor is supposed to be doing this kind of information. Now, I did already talk about pretty much most of that stuff, but as you can see, we've numbered all of this lovely little stuff, and it tells you where all of that information is coming from. One thing to note that I haven't talked about, but I will reiterate here, is the back button. RMS does not have a save feature. It only uses the back button. So if you want to save any changes to something, click on the back button. If you need more information about various different ways of navigating inside of RMS, you can visit our beginners training. We're going to have that tomorrow from 2 p.m. Central Time. And we'll go over all of that information. So if you need that, you can join us for that one there. But again, this is just how you go through and set up that kind of information. Now, I didn't talk about this before because it wasn't showing, but down here at the bottom, once the pay activity has been linked to a CLIN, you'll have your CLIN information showing up down here at the bottom. The CLIN number itself, the sum of all activities that are associated with it, and if there's any variances. So when they're first doing a manual add, there are definitely going to be variances if all they've added is one activity and it's not the full amount for the CLIN. So they'll just have to go through that process, and then once they get all of their pay activities, make sure there's no variance. And then as long as there's no variance, they're golden. All right. So from that view, there's two ways to get to that view: the single clicking on it and clicking on this edit button, or if you're adding it, you click on the add button. It will also go back to the view that we were just in. Now, if you, oh, we're zooming in on this guy. So just be aware that that's that information. Here's some more information if you need to look at it. I kind of already talked about this, so I'm not going to look at it again. But I told you we're going to talk about delete. Delete is a special, we'll just say that. So if your contractor has to delete activities for whatever reason, we do provide that option. We give them a couple of options. We have delete a single record, doing multiple deletes, or deleting all of the activities. Delete all activities, proceed with caution. Make sure you let your contractors know, proceed with caution, because if they have hundreds of activities and they go into some of the sort tiles, say they go under the CLIN tab, and then they go into only one CLIN, they double click on the CLIN, and they go to the delete button, and they choose delete all activities. Without realizing it, they have deleted every single activity in the contract, not just the ones attached to that CLIN, all of them, because that's what delete all activities does. It deletes everything. So make sure your contractor knows. Don't use delete all activities unless they really want to delete all the activities, because that's going to cost them a lot of time and a lot of effort to get all of that back into RMS unless they're using an SDEF file. So keep that in mind. Delete all activities, proceed with caution. But of course, RMS is nice. We have given you this little warning. It's like, are you sure you really want to do that? So there's no excuse for them to accidentally delete an activity, because they get a second chance. this is one of the few places that you do get a second chance. Now, there are other locations inside of RMS where if you choose delete a single record, it does not ask you. It says, okay, you want me to delete it? Done. But thankfully, that's a single record, so that's not as big of an issue as if you're trying to delete more than one. So this is what it looks like when you choose Enable Multiple Delete. Let me see if I can zoom in on that so we can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. There. So what you'll see here is when you have selected one thing, you go onto the delete option, you choose Enable Delete, you're going to have your lovely little checkboxes that will show up on this side. Now, again, you will need to select them based off of the checkbox if you want to do more than one. And then once you've selected all of the ones that you want deleted, hello mouse, you're going to come back up, choose the delete again, and choose delete selected records. Now, this is for your information, so that way if your contractor asks, hey, how do I delete these two? Can I do it in more than one? You can go back and you can tell them that this is how you do it. All right, my mouse disappeared. There we go. So you can delete the selected records, or you can select all of the records. Again, proceed with caution. Or you can unselect all of the records, or you can go back to the regular view by disabling multi-delete and not doing any kind of deletion, in which case it'll go back to the regular. Oh, so it shows you the D. If you choose this bottom one, it'll just go back to this without doing any kind of deletion. Okay. All right. This is the one that I was telling you about. Delete all activities. Again, we put this lovely little thing on here to let you know, please be careful with this one. And yes, it's going to ask you, are you sure? Before it'll allow you to actually do this one. Yeah, you can delete all of the activities. And yeah, there are some cases where you want to delete all the activities because you accidentally put it on the wrong contract. Well, more than likely it's the contractor that did it. So we provide that. However, again, make sure that's really what you want to do, because otherwise it's going to be a lot of work if you don't have an STF file. Okie dokie. We're going to move on to contract changes. Give me just 1 second while I wet my throat. All right. Contract changes. Under the Finances tab, you have the Contract Changes module. So if you need to make any edits after a payment has been made, and you need to change some money that is associated, either take off or put on, your first step is to start with contract changes. Of course, your first step actually is to do it in, I believe it's CEFMS or whatever software it is that's supposed to be used for the actual modifications. So you do the modifications outside of RMS first. Once it's been approved inside of CEFMS, then you come into RMS and you start the contract changes and contract modifications by going to the contract changes. Now, most contract changes are going to be including a BCD item or a basic change document. This is basically what it looks like for your reference. And then when you open up the contract changes, it's going to give you a list of all of the changes that you currently have with your contract. You have the option of add, editing, and deleting. And of course, you can search them or export this list as you choose. And then by single clicking on them, you will show what this information is for that particular change and where it's at by these lovely little checkboxes that are over here. Now, usually the goal is you want all of these checkboxes to be green before putting them on a modification, unless it says not required, in which case you don't need a checkbox beside that. Now, when you click on the add button on the previous view, you've got a couple of different options for adding. You can add a single part change request, or you can add a first part of a multi-part or a subsequent, which is the second one, a subsequent part of a multi-part, or you can do a weather modification. Weather modifications are special because they're only for modifications because progress was stopped due to severe weather for whatever happens to be. Now, weather modifications, they pre-populated a bunch of information for you already. So if you know it's just going to be for weather, I would choose this one because it'll format everything and make everything look pretty by using this one. When you do a weather modification, this is what you're going to see when you start that. After you click this next button, it will ask you what the date of the bad weather, and then it'll ask you what the change request number happens to be. Make sure you put the correct change request number in here because you are, can't remember if you can edit this or not. We'll see it on the next screen though. But if you're doing a single part change request, it's not going to ask, well, actually, if you're doing any of these three, it's not going to ask you this information, but it is going to ask you the request number. And then it is going to ask you what the one of the types are. We'll see that in just a second. The reason code, that's what it was. So it will ask you to enter the reason code as well as the change request number. So yeah, you can't edit the change request number. So make sure on the previous screen, you get the change request number correct there, because you can't edit it after it's been in here. You can edit the title. You can enter the inception date, the mod required date, and the date. If it's canceled, put in the date canceled. That goes in here. Otherwise, leave this date blank. You will have to have one of these two dates entered in order for this information to actually be available for use inside of the modification. So make sure you fill out all of this information correctly. Your reason codes, your agency reason codes, agency code, reason code, and mod type reason code. These will take you to the lookup fields that we talked about earlier in the description in the district office. What was the district system library? There we go. In the system library of the district. And when you click on this, it'll bring up a lookup field showing the list that we saw in the system library. At any point in time, you can see what the BCD item is going to look like by clicking on this lovely little button. Now, this is instantaneous and it constantly updates based off of what is in RMS at the time that you click this button. And you can select who the mod action is by. All right, the next tab is the description tab. Now, if it's a weather modification, your BCD item is already going to show up in here and you won't have to do the add button. And it's already going to fill out a whole bunch of information for the weather information, like this lovely little table right here. And it will format for you beautifully by doing that one. However, if you are not doing a weather modification, you will either have to click this add button here, or there's a button, a checkbox down here that says this is going to be for quantity changes in order to add your BCD item. Now, if you know the CLIN that you are making changes to is going to have changes to quantities, you need to click the checkbox that shows up somewhere down over here that says this is going to be a quantity change. Once that happens, you'll be able to open this one up, and then there's going to be a button right here that says enter quantity information, because this information will not be able to be changed or edited for quantity changes, because it's only going to allow you to pick the CLINs that have quantity changes on them. Otherwise, if it's just a dollar amount CLIN, you can click on this add button and then it'll come up and it'll show you here, and you can enter your initial estimate dollar amounts here, and then your phase time will show up in here. All right. Status funding tab. This is where you decide what kind of requirements, what kind of information is required for this particular contract. Now, which one is chosen is going to be based off of the contract mod, the office policy, the district policy, or the contract itself. So keep that in mind. If you want to know which of these you have to check, RMS does not know. RMS does not care. Because as long as you uncheck the box, if you don't need it, then it's not going to sit there and ask for the dates. But if you do check these boxes, you do need to make sure you fill out the dates that it populates in these columns over here once that is taken care of. Now, with the negotiations required, it will ask you, okay, so we negotiated this amount, say it was some amount, let's just say it was 15,000 to begin with, we negotiated for 10,000. You can choose whether or not to use the negotiated amount or the original amount, or if you have a proposed required, you can also use the proposed required. And then what will happen is down here, the change request amount will populate based off of which one you choose here, if negotiation or proposal is required. If neither of those are required, then it's going to populate based off of this amount that's right up here. And then you'll need to make sure that this variance goes away. Now, this is where some problems come in on contracts. This is the start. Unfortunately, RMS only shows you the funding accounts listed for this contract. It doesn't show you the PR&C numbers yet. It doesn't show you the obligation line items. So you must know which funding account the obligation is going to come from before putting money on any of these things here. Because if you put it on the wrong place, you're going to run into problems with your next progress payment. And you're going to be like, why is RMS on my obligations tab putting money on this CLIN when it's supposed to be putting it on that CLIN? I told it to put it on a different CLIN. It has to do with the funding accounts, because it's very, very important that if you've got a amount that is 15,000 is 10,000 is coming from one funding account and 5,000 is coming from another funding account, you must separate those out correctly here in order for that information to correctly populate for your next progress payment. So this is the start of one possible issue that we see on a lot of contracts. So make sure you know which funding account is associated with which obligation and which obligation is supposed to be used for this particular change request. All right, moving on to the contract modifications. That's this one here. Okay, now for contract modifications. When you go into the contract modifications, it's going to show you a list of all of the modifications that are currently in your contract. And of course, you have the options for add, editing, and deleting them. Again, searching and exporting them. And then when you single click on them, it will show you some information down here at the bottom and what status they're sitting at by these green check boxes over here. If there's no green checkbox, then it's not done yet. And of course, you'll have some information on this side. To get into a modification, you just double click on it, add a new modification, you click on the add button. When you have added or edited one, this is the edit view that you will see. And the first tab that shows up is the SF30-1 tab. Now there are 3 sections to this area. The first one is adding the change request to a particular modification. Now, when you first come in, you're going to have an add button right here, but this one, I believe, has already been completed, so it's no longer going to allow you to add any change requests to it. So you'll click on the add button. It's going to bring up a list of all of the change requests that have not been linked to a modification already in the list. And then all the way onto the right, there's going to be another box. If there is no check in that box, then you need to go back to the screen back here. You need to go back to either the Inception tab, the description, or the status funding and make sure everything is set up correctly. Now, I forgot to tell you that once you've added the information in the change amounts in the right funding accounts, you will need to change this change request funding status from proposed to approved. Once that is done, then when you go back to the modification edit view and you click on the add button, that checkbox should be checked. And then you can select it and add it to this particular modification. Now, if it has a quantity CLIN for it, it's already going to add the CLIN as well as the funding account. However, if it's a dollar amount change request, you will have to add the CLINs yourself by using the add button. Now, you can either add manually, you can edit a CLIN that already exists, or you can just automatically add a CLIN to balance it for the particular modification. Once that is done, then your funding information will show up down here. Now, the only funding information that's going to show up down here are the ones that you chose in the status fund tab to put dollar amounts on. Those are the only ones that will show up in here. So if a funding account is missing from here, you got to go back to the change request and make sure the money is placed on the correct funding account in order to see it in here. Now let's see, here's my next one. No, not yet. So this is where you're going to add the PRNCs to the funding. So the first screen on the change request status funding, where we put the funding amounts on the account, that's the first step. The second step is to put it on the right PRNCs. So that happens from here. You double click on this and then you go to the funding section and then you choose the correct PRNC. So again, you need to know your fundings and CEFMS in order to put this in the right place. Because if you chose the right funding account in the contract request changes, and then you come in here and you put it on the wrong PRNC, you're going to run into problems when you get over to the release mod tab, because you're not going to see what you're looking for. And I'll talk more about that when we get over there. All right, next is the SF30-2 tab. And as you can see, this tells you where in the SF30 it's actually going to show up, and we give you some information that's going to show up here. Now, note that this modification number is coming from PD squared. Make sure you get the right modification number in here before you finish off this mod package tab, because if this information is incorrect and you finish the mod package tab and you say completed, send to CEFMS, or not CEFMS, sorry, send to PCF, and it comes back with error, that modification number is wrong. You need to fix it. That means you're going to have to fix all of your documents to have the correct modification number from PD squared and then go manually upload it into PCF. That's a lot of work. So save yourself some time and just make sure you get the correct modification number in before you finish off the mod package tab. And here's some more information on that stuff, which I'm not going to talk about right now. And more information about stuff that is entered on the SF30 and on the SF30-3 tab. Let's see here. I think, let me go back one more. One thing that I forgot. Block 13E. This is important. Down here, there's a little lovely little box down here. If your contractor must sign the SF30, then you need to make sure this checkbox is checked. If you don't have the contractor sign the SF30, then you need to make sure this checkbox is not checked. Because if you have this checked and they're not supposed to sign it, when you look at your SF30 document down in block 13, it's going to have the check mark. And it's going to say, contractor is to sign the SF30. And you're like, wait a minute, no, they're not. Why is that on there? That's because the SF30-2 tab has a checkbox. Thank you. Keep that in mind. All right. Kind of talked about this. Again, more information for you guys about various different things on filling out the SF30 tab. And the next one, the release mod tab. This is where the rest of the magic happens for this particular modification. And what you will see here, there's another checkbox right here for contractor signature required. Now, this checkbox doesn't matter if the checkbox on SF30-2 tab is not checked. Because even if you put the information with the dates in here, it's not going to populate on the report because you didn't check this box over here. So make sure you check this box and fill out this information if it has contractor signature. If it doesn't have a contractor signature, then make sure this checkbox over here is unchecked and this checkbox over here is unchecked. Now, see the funding information down here, you have to have a government signature date entered into this text box right here, right, date box. And then once you have that date entered in there, everything from SF30-1, 2, and 3 is now going to no longer be editable. And this information, the obligations information, are going to be editable at that point. So this is kind of where I was talking about. When you double click on this one, it's going to go to the same basic screen as the one for the award CLINs funding button that I was talking about. And what will happen is you'll have a view, which we don't have a screenshot of that one, but what will happen is you'll have a view that will show the list of all of the obligations that you can link this modification to. Here's the caveat. If your obligation does not show, that means that either the information you entered, the PRNC number that you picked in the SF30-1 tab, or the funding account that you chose in the change request is not correct. Now, RMS does allow you to force it to go to the right one. There is a little checkbox up at the top, but I would not recommend doing that. The reason being is you will find that RMS will have issues with where to put the correct obligations if you do that. So if you get to this screen and you do not see the obligation line item that you know is supposed to be associated with this particular modification, then you have to go backwards and fix either the SF30-1 tab or the contract changes status funding tab. Now, we do have a video on how to go about fixing that information. It's on our YouTube channel. And again, I'll try to show you where that's at later in at the end of this whole section if we have time. But please note that it's actually a fairly easy fix and it will save you a lot of work in the long run, because if you get further into the contract and it looks like you're starting to run out of money because of a modification that was put on the wrong obligation earlier, it's going to save you a lot of time to fix it here, now, in the beginning, before later on in the contract. Because in order to fix it after a progress payment has been made, you're going to have to do another modification, and that will take a lot of time because you're going to have to figure out, well, where did it get messed up in the first place, and then do that modification and go through that process. And it's just going to take more time. So make sure that when you double click in here, if your obligation isn't showing, stop. Don't force it. Go back and make sure you put it on the right funding account and the right PRNC to save yourself a lot of work. Then when you're done with that and everything is balanced, there are no variances showing up down here, you're going to come down here and click this lovely little box. Modification funded with obligations in CEFMS. And before you do this one, well, actually, when you do this one, it's going to tell you to deal with the pay activities. So let's go ahead and move on before we go to that. Oh, look, this is some stuff. Aha. I already talked about that. All right, so this is the pay activities. So they do recommend that when you're doing a modification that you balance the pay activities before you actually complete this. Again, especially if your contract is using an SDF file, I would seriously recommend that you actually make the contractor do this, so that way there are no head scratchers when you go to do, when the contractor goes to do the next progress payment. So just keep that one in mind. But RMS does allow you to add that for this one. So if your contract is not using an SDF file, if it's manually entering it, then go ahead. You can add it in here. So when you go to that, so let me back up one second. So when it comes to this screen and you've got your CLIN, you just double click on this one to show the list of all of the pay activities that are already associated with that CLIN. And that's if you're modifying an existing CLIN. And then you can double click on one of the activities to adjust the dollar amounts to those activities by coming in here and then just adjusting this activity amount at this point in time. Otherwise, if it's not modifying an existing CLIN, it's a brand new CLIN, you'll have to go to the pay activities module and do an add from there. And then you'll have to set up all of this information, or better yet, have the contractor do that. Save yourself a little bit of work. All right, mod package. So we've updated the mod package, made your life much faster. You will notice on older contracts that for older modifications only that have already been completed, there'll be a list of a whole bunch of different document packages that you'll have to go in and you'll have to add documents to, and then complete it, and then back up, and then go into the next one, add the document, complete it, back up. That's a lot of work. So we simplified this process and gave you one document package for all of the documents. So you can add all of them in one place. Only caveat is that, now we've added a new column for the PCF container, so that way you can specify which area it needs to go in PCF. So you'll recognize these ones if you've been with RMS for quite some time, because these were the ones that used to be listed on the previous view, where you had to go into each one, add a document package, add the documents, sign it, complete it, back it out, complete it, back it out, go to the next one. You don't have to do that anymore. So we've made your life easier. We're trying to make it as simple as possible to be able to go in and do that stuff. But you do have to make sure that you set the PCF container after you've added the document to your document package in the mod packages. And then, of course, sign it or save it or export it or whatever you want to do with the regular document package as needed. Okay, so once it's done, let me back up here because I want to show you that screen. So once that part is done, all of the documents have been added, then you're going to check this box right here that says mod package complete, then to district PCF. Once you've checked that, it's going to have a status change in the contract file, which will tell you where it's at, if it's ready to go, that kind of thing. And then once that is done, you go back to the release mod tab, and then there's that last checkbox that you're going to want to check. Once that last checkbox is checked, this checkbox is checked, then on, oops, too far. Hello, go back. Screen. You will now see all of this information. You should have green checkboxes on all of this information, and then you'll have dollar amounts and times as we're set up for that particular contract. Now, this one didn't have any dollar amounts. I think this was a day. Oh, this was the weather modification. So there was $0. It was just a time change. That was it. So there wasn't anything going on in this one. Okay. Next, we have contractor claims and disputes. All right. If you have any contractor claims and disputes, this is where they're going to be added into RMS. You'll click on this add button here. And when you go in, you'll see the list of the current claims. And of course, you can edit or delete any claims as necessary. And again, you can go into the contract reports. So let me see if I can back up really fast. So contract reports shows up on this tab right here. And when you click on the contract reports, this is what it's going to show up. And you can use the search box to save yourself. and bring up the contract reports to show all of the contractor claims, contract reports, contractor claims, the claims and disputes that were listed in here all in one document or individually from using this area right here. Let's see here. When you click on the add button, it's going to ask you for this information right here. Now, the claim dispute ID is automatically generated by RMS. That's not something that you can change. It's just something that is automatically generated. You can, however, set the project manager by clicking on this staff lookup field. This is going to bring up a list of all of the staff that is listed in the RMS staff module inside of the district. If someone is not showing in this list, then please give the RMS Support Center a call. We can help you out and make sure that they're showing up like they're supposed to. You also have to set the type for the contractor claim dispute. And then once all of that stuff is done, you're going to click the OK button. Now, something to note about this. You remember that on the contract changes page, we had a contract claims disputes tab. In order to add a contract claim dispute tab to the contract changes, you will need to do that in the contract disputes, claims disputes area after the contract change request has been created. Once that's been created in the edit view of the contractor claims disputes all the way down at the bottom, there is a checkbox that says final settlement requires contract modification. That is the checkbox that you want to check to open up the option to link this claim dispute to a contract change. And in order to link it to a change request, you'll need to push on the button that says change request to look up all of the change requests that are in the contract. And then once you click it and click OK, it will link it to your change request and then open up the change request itself if there's anything else that you need to add to the change request. And of course, you can add the supporting documents to the change request too. All right. So this is what the report for the contractor claims will look like. Again, this comes from the contract reports module only. It's actually not in the contract claims disputes area. All right, we're going to open it up for questions and take a really quick 5-minute break. So first, I'm going to open up for questions. If I don't hear anything in about 30 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and break it for about 5 minutes. And then when we come back, we're going to go on to what's the next section? Next section is the Schedules tab. Woo-hoo. All right, any questions? No questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a really quick break. If you need to run, grab something to drink or something like that, go ahead and do so now. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and keep going. We're moving on to the Schedules tab. So we are actually doing a more in-depth training on the Schedules tab tomorrow at 11:30 Central Time. If you would like to join that, that will be, go to our website. The links for all of that information will show up on our website and you can download the file so that you can follow along. I'll kind of hit on some of that stuff in here, but we'll go into more in depth in that training. So if you have any questions about that one, you'll probably be able to get them answered by coming to that training tomorrow. Okay, next, if I can get the right button to work. There we go. All right, so when you log into a contract, the Schedules tab, that is going to be what we're talking about. And here is a list of a whole bunch of stuff. This is information. It's provided for your reference. You can go ahead and read that whenever you have the time. Again, the link for the slides will be on our website for you to be able to do that. All right. The first module inside of the schedules is the activity schedules. Now, this is not going to populate for anything until activities have already been added to your contract. Once they've been added to your contract, depending on whether or not you've set up the contract to use an SDF file or manually entering the activities will depend on how this view is displayed. Now, this particular display is for manually entering activity start and finish dates for the schedule. The actual start and finish dates comes from the QC daily reports in this particular view, so you can't edit that here. However, for information on what it looks like with the NAS SDF CR training tomorrow, we'll go into more detail, like I said, using that information. And of course, you have your sort tiles all the way up at the top. showing you all of the activities, ones that are not started, in progress, not finished, or finished. And of course, you have your search and your export options as well to help narrow down the list. The next one we're talking about is the milestone schedules. Now, this is where you will pretty much do a lot of information that's going to set the status of the contract and is going to mark how things are progressing inside of the contract. You can sort this view by these various different sort tiles that show up at the top. You can see the award duration, the current duration. You can change this to group by various different things. Of course, you've got your filters, which if you would like, the beginner's training is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time. We will talk more about that kind of information there and go into more depth about how to change the view of this and look at different things. Excuse me. Next, we have the placement schedule. So for the placement schedule, this is currently undergoing a lot of different changes. So if you're having issues with this one, just know that we are actually in the process of making some changes with this. We're working with a headquarters as well as the RMS PMO to get this set up better and working more like it needs to be working. So you know, this is here, and there is some information about the various different tabs showing on this spot. The feature schedule. Now, the feature schedule will not populate if under the QA/QC tab, features of work module has not been set up. So if you want to be able to see the feature schedule with a list of things that are showing up in here, it must first be set up in the QA/QC features of work. That has to be set up. Then the 3-phase inspection has to be set up. And then you can come in here and double click on any of these to change the dates. And again, we'll go into more detail about that kind of stuff tomorrow during our 11:30 training. Again, that's 11:30 Central Time. Are there any questions about schedule? Nope. Okay. If you do have questions, again, join us tomorrow and we will go into more in-depth detail about schedules and various different things, including importing from a scheduling software. All right. Import export section of RMS. So we're going to go ahead and go over this information. When you log into a contract, run over to the import export tab and you will see these modules inside of here. Now, if your contract is not set up to use NAS SDEF, then this module will not show up in here. Otherwise, you will see all of this information showing up in the import export module. Now, something to note, I don't think we actually talk about it here, but document package export. This is going to export documents that were added to QA reports, QC reports, things like that. So if you want to be able to export all of those documents in one place, you can come over here to the document export package. This is if you want to export some stuff that is an active live contract. So if it's not archived and you want to export some of those documents, you can come over here and do that there. Importing from P2. Again, this has now been converted into an automatic process. It's done through batching at the end of the day, and we'll go through and we'll import everything. Just know that when you enter the information inside of P2, it can take anywhere from 24 to 72 hours before it will actually show up in RMS. But if after 72 hours you do not have, you do not see what you're looking for your administration P2 module, it's not being allowed for add at that point, then there are a couple of things that you need to check. The first one is that it is linked to an RMS A code. The second one is that it is linked, it has a dollar amount that is greater than a penny. If you put a penny on it, it's still not going to come in. So try putting 2 cents if you don't have any money. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a whole lot more than 2 cents showing up for it to come in from P2. If it's still not showing up after all of that stuff has been confirmed, contact the RMS Support Center. We'll be more than happy to help you with that. Now, probably most of you will know that there were a little while ago, we were having some really big issues with P2 not connecting to RMS. We're hoping that most of that has been taken care of. But again, if you're having issues, please contact the RMS Support Center. We will take a look into that and let you know what we can do to help you out. Next, we have importing submittals. So if RMS is allowing you to be able to import your submittal register by using this import button. Now, I would recommend either using import submittals or import SpecsIntact, because it will make getting the information into RMS much easier. Because if you try to manually enter, or the contractor, so if you or the contractor has to import this kind of information, if you have to enter it manually, it can take much longer to get the information entered into RMS by doing it manually versus importing it. Because if you import it, we have templates that we provide for you for the register. Although if you're using SpecsIntact provides everything that you need, and it will actually give you more features and more abilities to import. You just have to, once you've done it in SpecsIntact, you have to export it to a TXT file. And then you can import it into RMS, and it will make it much faster for you to be able to bring all that information in. One thing to note about importing, though, you have two options for importing. You can overwrite existing submittals, or you can merge with existing submittals. Now, proceed with caution when using the overwrite, and actually only ever use the overwrite for the very beginning, the very first import. After the first import, don't use it again. And only use this if you have not, or if the contractor has not already submitted any submittals, because this overwrite will override and delete everything in the transmittal log. So if there is anything in the transmittal log module and you choose this override existing submittals option, or your contractor chooses this override existing submittals option, guess what? All of it's going to be gone. However, the good news is RMS records who and when has done this process. So if anyone goes in and overwrites existing submittals and completely blows it out of the water, then you'll be able to call the RMS Support Center and we can tell you who's done that. Now, keep in mind, individual items can be deleted from within the submittal register itself. We don't record that information. We don't log that information. So make sure you give your contractors the correct training on how to deal with that and when to delete those. Because if they delete them out of there and it's gone, well, it's gone, and they're going to have to go back and do more work and put the information back in there. So just keep in mind. But using these ones, I would suggest using the merge with existing submittals. Okay. Now, importing information from another contract. There are times that you'll want to import some of this information from another contract into a new contract for one reason or another. And you can do that by coming to contract data from another contract, copy data from another contract, and then selecting the items that you want to copy. Now, you have to select which contract you're copying from by clicking on this lookup field. It's going to give you the list of all of the contracts available to copy from, and then checking the boxes that you want to copy the information. So say you want to copy the prime contractor because you know this contract is going to be done by that prime contractor. Well, you can go to the contract that they're already set to, check the box for a prime contractor, and then click on copy selected data, and it'll copy over into your contract. So that'll make your life easier. You won't have to reset all the prime contractor information. However, you'll have to figure out which of these are actually going to be something that you need to copy over or not. And then export mod lists. So for all the lists that, for the contract modifications, for all of them that were in RMS, you can come over here and you can export that list. It will give you all of this information right here, and you can export it to a file, or you can copy it to a clipboard and paste it in a program of your choosing, depending on how you want to do that. Just know that you have the option to come in here and get this information off of the mods. Now, this is better than if you're going to the contract modification. Remember, there's that export button. That's only going to give you a couple little bits of information, but it's not going to give you all of this. So if you need all of this information, make sure you come into the export mods list and choose either export to file or export to clipboard. Aha. Next is the import SpecsIntact. Now, the nice thing about the import SpecsIntact is it's going to pull in both the submittal register as well as the specification sections that you have set up inside of the SpecsIntact file. And by setting up all of this information, you are going to just make it easier and faster to get the information inside of RMS. All right, the next tab that we're going to be talking about is the Closeout tab. And here's the information that we are going to be talking about regarding that. And as you can see, these are the activities in RMS that can be done with the closeout. One thing to note, we've opened up the DD form 1354 to allow the contractor to input some of that information, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the real property can be done by the contractor as well. All right, for the real property. When you go into the real property, it's going to give you, first it's going to give you a list of all of the real property that has been added into RMS. And then when you double click on the individual real property items, it's going to show you this edit view right here. Or if you choose add, it's going to show you this, and it's already going to have this checkbox checked. Now, this checkbox is going to be required because the contractor is going to fill out the information that is in, or can fill out the information that is here in this top part. And the government is then going to have to go through and verify that, yes, the contractor filled that out correctly, and you can check this box accepted, and then they won't be able to go in and edit this at that point. And you'll be able to come down and choose the quantity amounts and some of the stuff. I believe the contractor can do this little bit of information too, but they cannot do the dollar amount. That has to be done by the government. And of course, this funding source section down here also has to be done by the government. We do have a training YouTube tutorial training module. I can talk. Video on our YouTube training site, which I will show you guys that here in a little bit after we're finished. So that way you can send it to your contractor to let them know, hey, this is how you go about doing this kind of stuff. So make sure you get that in there correctly. And then it'll also show you what you need in order to be able to analyze it after the contractor is finished. And here's some more information about the real property. This is for your view because there's a little bit more information than what I talked about before. You can go ahead and take a look at this and read all of that as you see fit. What is set up in here is going to be dependent upon your district's policy, your contract, and or your office policy. So you'll be able to take a look at that. The nice thing is we do allow you to use more than one funding source for the real property item by checking this box right here. And then you'll have the option of having 2 more funding sources that will show up, and it'll show what the percentages it comes from for each of them. Now, the first funding source, you won't be able to edit the percentage for that one. It will calculate automatically based off of the percentage that you put in the other 2 funding sources. And then, of course, you can set your funding organization codes and your interest codes by using these blue lookup fields. Now, anytime you see these boxes, remember, they're lookup fields. So you'll be able to select them from somewhere. However, this is not a lookup field. This is not a lookup field. These 2 are buttons. But they do show a lookup field. But it's a little different than this one. All right, for the transfer DD 1354 edit views, you have 3 tabs that run across the top. The first one that you're going to see is the header real property. So this is going to be the header information that shows up on the DD 1354, as well as the property items that are going to be listed on the DD 1354. Now, the nice thing about the property items is we've made it much easier for you to put the ordering number for these property items by allowing you to drag and drop them down here at the bottom. So if you add them in the order that you don't want them displayed, say you add this one first and this one second, but you want them to be opposite, you just click and hold on it, drag it up to the top and let it go. And then when you click on the DD form 1354, how it's displayed here will be the order in which it's displayed on the DD 1354 form itself. The information that you put into this these text boxes is going to be dependent upon the actual transfer that you're doing, as well as some other district and office policies set up for that one. So check with your district's policy for all that information. Next tab is the deficiencies tab. So if there's any deficiencies that are associated with this transfer, you're going to add those by using this add. And you need to coordinate with your RPAO prior to the submission of this particular portion of that. Any comments will show up in here, and then the description for that deficiency will show up in here when you select that particular deficiency. And then the last tab is the remarks tab. Now this one, you will fill out the information as required, and this kind of information needs to be filled out as well. If you need to have the DDC to apply to all of the real property, then check this box so that way the 1354 adds the money all to the correct real property. So for all of the real property that is added here, if it needs DDC, click this box right here. If you have any remarks, they go down here at in the project remarks section. And then of course, if you need to add, once you're finished filling everything out, it's all good to go. You need to put the DD 1354 because it's got to go to PCF. You'll click on this button here up at the top, save the document to your computer, and then choose the add, go into the document package, add the document from inside the document package, complete the document package, sign the DD 1354 if you need to. And once the document package is complete, it will be off to PCF for you, and you are done at that point in time. If you need to know how to do the document packages signings, you can join us for our beginners training tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time, because we will be going over that. All right. The other place to go to get your DD 1354 is in the Contract Reports tab of your contract. When you go into the Contract Reports tab, what you can do is go to the Closeout section, click on the little arrow to open it up, or you can simply type in 1354 here to minimize all of this stuff, and that will show you the 1354. But again, you also have the warranty inspection listing as well as the CPAR Contractor Performance Evaluation report showing up in this area as well. So keep that in mind for that one. The next module is the Requisition DD 1149. So this is when the property changes hands during the construction process. That's why you would use this DD 1149, and you'll fill out all of that information. When you go in there, you'll choose add, you'll transfer when it's over, you'll fill out all of the quested information, the shipping information, and go through that process. And then there's more information about it in here. You can go ahead and read that when you have time. This is what the edit view will look like. You've got your header tab and your transfer property tab. On your header tab, you fill out the transfer date. You fill out the from and the to, the date it was required, the requisition number, and the material required date, and fill out any of the appropriation information that's on the bottom part. Then you'll go over to the transfer property itself, and you'll add the property that needs to be transferred over, and with the description in here. Once that's done, you can click on the DD form 1149, save that to your computer, but you will have to add this one probably through the contract file or manually inside of PCF if it needs to go to PCF. All right. Next is the CPAR Evaluations module. So if you are going to be doing your contractor performance assessment report inside of RMS, this is where you'll do it. And as you'll see, there are tabs across the top with all of the information that you will need to fill out. What you enter in here is going to be based off of your district office policy as well as the contract itself. Once everything is entered correctly, then you will need to click on this button to export to CPARs. What that's going to do is it's going to bring up a PDF viewer showing you the report based off of everything that you filled out here. You'll need to save that to your computer and then go to the CPAR location wherever it needs to be uploaded and upload it there. But this is where you can do it inside of RMS, and then the report will be pre-filled out for you once you fill out this information here. All right, warranty tracking. All right, if your contractor is going to warranty the items for which they have built for you, this is where they will go in and add the information for you to review and take a look at. Now, it does give you, here, let me zoom in on that bottom screen there. There we go. So it does give the contractor the ability to put in the warranty start and end. It also allows for 2 different inspection times. Now, whether they're 4-month and 9-month is arbitrary. Not all of them are going to be 4 and 9. Some of them could be 6 and 12, or maybe they only need 1. If you need 2 warranty inspection times, then you can check both of these boxes and just do it based off of the date here that you put in these 2 boxes down here. For the 4-month inspection due date, this is when it's supposed to be due. This is when the next inspection is supposed to be due. And then the contractor, once the inspection is done, they'll come in here and they'll check these boxes right here and then they will add any documents that they have created for these inspections to these document packages. And then the government, y'all, can come back in here, look at the documents, and if you agree with them, then you can accept it. It can go off to PCF. If you disagree with them, then at that point you can go back and talk to your contractor and be like, hey, well, you know, this didn't work the way it was supposed to. Or in your remarks, you said that this was a problem because of la la la. Let's talk about that, because that should not be a problem, that kind of thing. Now, these remarks usually are coming from the contractor here and here, but they can also be from the government. So just keep that in mind. We have that for you as well. All right, so here's some more information. It's kind of sort of what I was talking about, just a little bit more. We're talking about corrective work as well as verifying any deficiencies. You can read that at your leisure, and also follow your district's policy to determine how to go about dealing with the warranty stuff. All right, so we have reached the end of our training for today. I'm going to open this up for questions regarding anything that we've talked about. If I don't hear anything in about 30 seconds, then I'm going to go ahead and run over and show you our website as well as our YouTube site, so that way you'll know where all of this information is from. Something that I forgot to tell you at the beginning, this and all of our sessions are always recorded, and after about 5 business days, they will be posted on the YouTube site, and I'll show you where that is in about 30 seconds if I don't hear any questions. Okay, I'll be quiet now for 30 seconds to see if anybody has a question. Okay, so since I don't hear any questions, let me go ahead and introduce you to our website. The nice thing about our website, is that, why is it not letting me? There we go. Hey. All right, sorry, my WebEx is being silly. Okay, there we go. So on our website, it's rms.usace.army.mil. What you will notice is we have a bunch of information that will show up here with training information plus all of the links, which the slide links will show up here later on today. But we also have some other information. You can go find our release notes here. Some documentation will show up over here. And then if you want to get access to the YouTube channel, you can click on this box right here where it says RMS Help Videos. And that will take it to our YouTube channel. Now, in our YouTube channel, there's a couple of different places that you can go. You can go to all videos, and this will show you every single video that we post. We do post a video. We post 4 new training videos every single month. So you can always come back and check. We'll update old videos. We'll add new videos, those kinds of things here. Or you can go over to the playlists. And in the playlist, we have a troubleshooting RMS facts list for all of the videos that are talking about troubleshooting. We've got just basic training videos. We've got government mode only videos, contractor mode only videos, and of course, our webinars. This is where all of our webinars live. So all of the webinars that we do after we've scrubbed out all of the information, they will get posted on here. So for today's training, in 5 business days, what you will be able to do is you'll be able to come into YouTube and come to this webinar section, and it will show up that it is now on YouTube, and you can go back and review some of the things that we talked about. Now, the nice thing about these videos is when you go into those videos, if you come down here to the description section and choose show more, we give you the link for where everything is. So if it's a 2-hour training and you only want to see one part, you can come into the description, click on this timestamp, and it will go straight to that timestamp and allow you to only view that portion. Also, you will see that there's like little weird like tabs. Those are where the timestamps are. That's one section, that's another section. So that we tried to make it as easy as possible for you guys. So if there's only like one section you want to see, what did she say about that? What did they talk about with that one? Then just come down here and you'll see all the timestamps for that. All right, so at this point, since we don't have any questions and I am not hearing anything else, I'm going to send this back over to our RMS PMO Dallas and allow him to close it out. Dallas?
Thank you very much. I mean, that was a lot of information. So I just want to remind everybody again, tomorrow we do have our other training. So keep an eye out for that. And Again, if you have any questions, even after the fact, you can always reach out. And I'd like to thank you for your time today. Have a good one. Bye.